What's good, bro? We're back in here. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a very good Arcane build. I'm sorry there's no montage. I put a montage in my last build video, my first build video, but those take a lot of time and that's just something I don't have nowadays. However, if you guys want to stick around towards the end of the video, there will be a showcase in PvP. I also need to mention that any build videos that I make, guys, are really just blueprints. You guys can honestly just flex with them and use whatever you want. You don't have to use exactly what I show you in this video, but I'm showing you guys something that definitely works for me. When it comes to weaknesses, if I had to say there are any for this build, I would have to say any enemy that does not bleed, this build isn't as good as it could be if the enemy could bleed, of course. And that's because if you're making an Arcane build, you're more than likely just trying to make people bleed. But luckily, you do enough damage with this build, even without the bleed effect taking place, to the point where you're honestly going to be okay, or at least you should be. I'm not going to be the one holding your controller for you and making the inputs. You guys still got to make the magic happen, all right? Now that's out of the way, I should mention that the starting class I have for this build is Confessor. So I'm gonna just show you guys my stats at 150, and as I mentioned before, this build is a blueprint. The thing that I need to focus on while showing you guys off my stats is my faith really quick. Everything else seems like it would be pretty self-explanatory as to why you would have it at the point where it is, except for maybe Arcane and Dexterity. Like, why did I go for the balance of 50 and 40? I'll explain that in a second. But the one thing that I really want to mention is the faith that I have. I have 23 faith. Of course, I could level up right now. I'm not going to do that because I want to stay at the melt level of 150. If I go higher, I might not find as many matches. But the reason why I have 23 faith is honestly just because of the fact I like being a freaking dragon. I just wanted to use the dragon attacks in this game, so I put enough faith so that I could use the dragon breath where I go up in the sky. It's really childish, I know. I don't have to put the faith to this high, and you guys don't have to do that either. Honestly, I feel like you can just put it at 17 so that you can use the lightning strike or lightning spear, whatever it's called. I'm gonna be going over my spells later though in this video, and honestly I feel like you don't need a faith higher than 17. You can put these points elsewhere, but if you guys want to literally copy me and do exactly what I'm doing, I put my stuff to 23 just because of my preferences. At 40 vigor, I feel like you have enough health to survive a lot of very heavy attacks. On top of that, this is the soft cap, if I recall correctly, for vigor. For 25 endurance, I feel like you get enough equipment load and stamina to really go out there and wear whatever you want in regards to heavy armor, and also have a lot of stamina. That's not to say that you're going to be able to literally equip everything that you could possibly equip to your character, but you should be good to equip some pretty heavy armor if you really want to. Put my mind at 30, it honestly makes me feel like I have enough FP to use a bunch of different skills and not have to use my flask every 3 seconds, so that really works out well. And for my dexterity and arcane, I have to start talking about my weapons in a little bit. So we'll get back to my dexterity and arcane, but for now, just know that I have a 40 dexterity and a 50 arcane. Let's talk about these weapons for a second so I can give you guys my entire reasoning behind my 50 arcane and my 40 dexterity. Some of you may be looking at my weapons and might be completely confused in regards to the scaling at least. Why would I have a higher arcane than I would dexterity? See, the thing is, when I was over here reallocating my attributes and everything, trying to see what would give me the most damage output, I ended up concluding that the best balance in terms of attributes that would give me the most damage was to have 50 arcane and 40 dexterity rather than having 50 dexterity and 40 arcane. It's a little weird because it says that its attribute scaling is D for arcane and B for dexterity for the Rivers of Blood. But yeah, that's just how that turned out, so that's why I went with that. On top of that, I'm using the Dragon Communion seal, and this seal scales with arcane, so that means having a higher arcane also helps me out with my seal, making it possible for my incantations to now do more damage. But I have 2 weapons that I like to run with, honestly, at the same time. You guys don't have to run with both of these at the same time. I just like using them because for different situations, I feel like I just want to use one or the other. In PvP, I tend to only want to use the Rivers of Blood. However, sometimes I'll try to fake out my opponent into thinking that this is the only weapon I'm using and then use Eleanor's pole blade because it will really mess them up. In the showcase, I'm going to try to pull that off at least once or twice. Let me show you guys the weapon arts really quick. So the Rivers of Blood weapon art is called the Corpse Piler, and basically you're just doing a few slashes. These will consume stamina and FP when you use them, and depending on the amount of times you do the input for the weapon art, that will dictate how many slashes you do. So if I tap it once, I'll do 2 slashes, right? So 1, 2 after just 1 input. If I do 2 inputs, right, I'll do 5 slashes, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I do 3 inputs, I will now do 6 slashes. It's weapon art is pretty quick and it does successive attacks, so honestly you can kind of stagger an enemy with that first attack and they'll get hit with the second one, or maybe you'll whiff the first one and they'll still get hit with the second one. I have to mention as well that this attack has more range than the actual blade would make it seem like it has. You see how this blade isn't as long as the actual blood slash itself. That can kind of allow you to zone certain melee enemies that have to get really close up on you. I know it also fakes out a lot of people in PvP because they'll think that your sword won't be able to touch them, and in actuality, it very much can, and probably by the time they realize that they're getting hit, they're on the brink of death. And for Eleanor's pole blade, this is basically what I use if I know for a fact I just need to keep applying bleed, because you can apply bleed very fast with this weapon. If I do a charge attack, I even hit one of these cool little things. This looks like a weapon art in itself. It's so damn cool. But twin blades are really cool in this game, guys. If you haven't used them yet, definitely would recommend trying to check them out, just because they're so much fun in my opinion. But the weapon art for this has multiple inputs as well. You can just do one input and you'll end up doing something like that, but if you do another input, see, you'll do that little slash and the step back, which is really cool in my opinion. My bread and butter is the Rivers of Blood, just because I've kind of fell in love with it and I just feel really comfortable with it. But there are plenty of times where I've used the Eleanor's pole blade and I just went absolutely ham, especially if I'm fighting an enemy with a shield, because it's really easy to make them stagger. Let's talk about my spells for a second. As I said, guys, I'm using the Dragon Communion Seal, which is making my incantations scale with my Arcane. What you guys are seeing are the spells that I would use for this build at this point in time. Now, I don't want you guys thinking I'm using all of these all at once. No. I just want to have them up on screen so you guys can see the different ones I use. The reason why you use Flame Grant Me Strength is because you get a physical and fire affinity attack power buff. And one thing I did not mention earlier in regards to the two melee weapons I use is just that both of these actually do inflict fire damage. So naturally, if you use a spell that boosts your physical and your fire damage, you're naturally just going to do more damage with both of those melee weapons. Flame Cleanse Me is something that I just like to have when I'm running around in PvE, just in case I get poisoned or I get hit with Scarlet Rot, especially the Scarlet Rot thing, because oh my god, is it annoying. Dragon Bolt Blessing is something I like to have just because it can make certain enemies' weapons bounce off of my body. On top of that, you become more resistant to all ailments. However, your lightning damage negation will be reduced if you're using Dragon Bolt Blessing. The next spell I want to speak about is a really annoying spell. Oh my goodness, this is so good and it's so annoying, and everyone hates it when they have to go up against them in PvP because they just don't want to put up with it. This thing does not cost much FP, so that enables you to basically just spam it. Now what happens when you use Swarm of Flies? You see how they're going really slow, right? They go really slow, but they also can go for a very long time, and they kind of just exploded up there, and I have no reason why that happened. But basically, when the flies transform into this cloud, when they make contact with something, anything within that cloud aside from you is going to get just straight up torn to pieces by these flies. And no, they're not going to do that much damage individually with each little tick, but what happens is they build up bleed very fast. Sometimes I'll even use it in a close range situation because I know my opponent will now have to start rolling around in a panic-like state, knowing that they can't really attack. And a lot of times, if I see that I can kind of hide in the cloud, maybe I'll switch weapons and I'll do a different weapon art, and it can really annoy some people when you're using Swarm of Flies in this game, but it's a really good incantation. I have Lightning Spear as another spell. The reason why I have Lightning Spear is because I wanted something that gives me a good amount of range and can be cast fast. And of course, my favorite element is lightning, so I absolutely love using it, but this is really just used for players in PvP situations who want to just sit back and just cast their spells and just not try to close the gap ever. It does not have one-shot potential, but it definitely is a very useful skill in my opinion. Another spell you may see me rocking is Magic Fortification. The reason for this is self-explanatory because of the fact it fortifies you against magic. Moving towards some dragon skills for a second. So these are pretty self-explanatory. I have Borealis's Mist. I think that's how you say the name. Probably not. I suck at saying names. But I have that, and I have I don't know how to say these names. Oh my goodness. But both of these are pretty self-explanatory. One does frost build up. The other one does rot build up. It really just depends on what I'm trying to do. Aside from the status effects that you can get from using both of those skills, I just find it very funny to kind of troll players because I don't know. It's just funny seeing them run. Now for my armor, of course, I could put on things that could protect me a little bit more, or things that that could give me a little bit more of a buff to my arcane, something like that. But you guys know my rules. I just want to put on whatever I feel like makes me look the coolest while also not fat rolling, and that's basically what we're rocking right now. You know, we're going with the full-on blood build and whatnot, and we have some dragon attacks, so I feel like it kind of matches. Say for example, if I put on the Helix Tree Night Helm, I have a higher faith than what I currently do. Or if I want to put on the Mask of Confidence, it would give me more arcane. Yes, I could do that, but at the same time, I really like the way my outfit looks. For people who don't know what armor I have on though, and may just want to put this on because they like the aesthetic as well, I have Radon's red main helm, and I also have the Dragon Knight set. Moving on to my talismans, I have the Erdtree's Favor +2, of course, because that raises my max HP, stamina, and equipment load. It's just an amazing talisman that I feel like a lot of people should have. I'm rocking the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia because it greatly raises attack power with successive attacks. Instead of rocking this, you could get Millicent's Prosthesis. I suck at saying that. The reason why that's a good alternative to this is because you naturally get a buff to your dexterity when you have Millicent's Prosthesis on, and on top of that, you do get a buff when doing successive attacks, though not as great as you would with this. Another talisman that I have on is a defensive talisman. I could rock other things so that I could do more damage, but honestly, I just like having the extra defense. It makes me feel safer. I love it. I already do enough damage if I'm just not playing stupid, so why not get something that's just gonna keep me alive? This helps me avoid getting one-shotted. It doesn't have to be the Dragon Crest Great Shield. You can use literally any of the other talismans that give you a boost to your defenses, that sort of thing. But if you're looking for something for just straight physical defense, the Dragon Crest Great Shield is the absolute best that you can get in this game. And for my last talisman, I have Lord of Blood's Exaltation. This talisman boosts your attack power if blood loss takes place in the vicinity you're in. So of course, it's very nice to have. If you guys want to know what I'm rocking for my Wondrous Physick, I'm rocking the Windy Crystal tier and the Opaline Bubble tier. I don't know if I said that correctly. Opaline, I don't know. This is honestly just a cautious tier. As you guys are seeing, temporarily increases rolling efficiency and significantly negates damage received. If I was throwing caution to the wind, I'll probably rock something like the Flame Shroud and Crack tier. This gives me a buff to my fire attacks, and as I mentioned before, my weapons that I'm using actually do fire damage. But yeah, there are a bunch of ways you can finesse with the Wondrous Physick to really get some good results. You could of course use a Cerulean Hidden tier. You guys should know what this does by now. Everyone's talking about it. You don't lose FP when you're using skills or spells while this effect is in place. Now the effect of this does go away quickly, but it can be very clutch if you feel like you're losing because you're using too much FP. The Green Burst Crystal tier is something that I've used in this build before in the past as well, just because it gives me a temporary boost to my stamina recovery speed. But that's about it in regards to an overview of this build. If you guys feel like you're going to want to use this build, or if you feel like you're going to recommend this to a friend, leave a like on the video, and guys, comment down below if you have any questions or concerns regarding the build. But of course, subscribe to the channel, turn on that bell if you guys would like to see more Elden Ring content from me. I'm gonna show you guys a showcase. I know a lot of people have been asking for some PvP stuff from me. Here you go.